WrestleMania. Some call it the grandest stage of them all. I call it yearly disappointment. For 40 years, WrestleMania has graced our television screens, and every year we watch regardless of quality and regardless of length. You know what's better than watching WrestleMania though? Playing WrestleMania. And thankfully, there were a handful of WrestleMania video games released over the years that allow us to do that, like WrestleMania 2000 on the Game Boy Color. Now this is what a real wrestling game looks like. WrestleMania video games have been a thing since the days of the NES, with the release of none other than WWF WrestleMania on the NES. Look, I get it's the NES and all, but they could have at least tried a little harder to make Hulk Hogan actually look like himself. Actually playing the game? What the fuck am I looking at? After this, multiple different WrestleMania games would be released throughout the 90s, such as WrestleMania the arcade game and WrestleMania Challenge. I won't really be talking about these games in this video though, as they're so unbelievably simple that I don't even know what the hell I would say about them. WrestleMania the arcade game I will mention, however, as it was pretty cool. It was pretty much just Mortal Kombat with WWF superstars minus all the blood and whatnot. The rest of the games I'll be talking about in this video are primarily the ones based off of specific WrestleManias, with the exception being Legends of WrestleMania. So without further ado, let's start by taking a look at WrestleMania 2000 for the Nintendo 64. Holy shit, what an intro! Now it's worth noting that this game was released in 1999, just a few months before WrestleMania 2000 had even happened, and because of that, WrestleMania 2000 isn't even in this game as a playable arena. This game's name is a lie. The WrestleMania 2000 video game is pretty awesome. I especially love how this game looks. There's just something so charming about the way all the superstars look with the graphics of the N64. Speaking of the superstars, this game had a pretty great roster. I mean, this game let you play as the Blue Meanie. Need I say more? Like I said though, on top of the roster being pretty fantastic, every superstar looks great, and that even extends to their entrances as well. Every entrance is animated pretty smoothly too. Now, not to say there isn't or can't be any jankiness to them. This is an N64 game we're talking about after all, but in my opinion, the entrances look pretty good. The actual gameplay is also pretty fun. If you're playing this game nowadays, the controls are a little hard to get the hang of, but then again, I'm playing this game with an Xbox controller, so take that as you will. At the end of the day though, the gameplay is pretty simplistic and bare bones. It's not the most in-depth wrestling game you'll ever play, but you can have fun with it. Occasionally, you'll even have superstars run in during your matches to attack you, which makes every match you play feel pretty exciting, because you never know who's gonna run out. Moving on to the match types, you get your standard one-on-one matches, tag matches, triple threat, and cage matches. Not a whole lot, but like I said before, this is a wrestling game for the N64. There's bound to be limitations. As for the extra modes, there's Road to WrestleMania, which is pretty much just a season mode, King of the Ring, which is, well, a King of the Ring tournament, a pay-per-view mode where you run your own show, and a Royal Rumble. Now, yeah, while this game doesn't have a whole lot of options for things you could do in terms of match types, it makes up for it with the fact that it's just so fun to play. The season mode could last you hours upon hours, and hell, if you're the type of person that enjoys GM mode type stuff, the pay-per-view mode might even last you a while as well. Everything in this game has some sort of replay value to it. With that, I think I've said all there is to say about WrestleMania 2000. For now anyways, until I make a full video on it at some point. So why don't we move on to the next WrestleMania game, that of course being WrestleMania 18 for the Nintendo GameCube. WrestleMania 18 was released in 2002 for the GameCube, and you know what? I'm gonna say it. I don't really like this game all that much. Visually, I think the game looks good. The real issue lies with the gameplay. As is the trend with these WrestleMania games on Nintendo platforms, the controls are super simplistic, but they are not by any means easy to figure out. To pick up a weapon, you have to press X and A at the same time. Only problem is that A is the grapple button and X is the button to pick up your opponent. So this ends ends up making picking up a weapon when near your opponent damn near impossible. Then to do your finisher, once your special move meter is full, you have to press B and A at the same time, but in my time of playing the game, I could never seem to pull it off. On top of that, the gameplay is so unbelievably slow that trying to do anything exciting or cool in this game feels like an impossibility. When playing the game though, I couldn't even do dives off the top rope or anything of that nature. This is easily the weakest gameplay out of any WWE game Yuke's has ever developed. Honestly, I think I'd rather play WWE 2K20 over this because as bad as 2K20 was, at least the gameplay was decent. Well, while the gameplay isn't all that great, the roster on the other hand is a much different story. Now sure, this isn't the greatest roster we've ever had in a WWE game, but it's still a great representation of who was around in WWE at the time of this game's release. This game had the American Badass Undertaker, Stone Cold Steve Austin, The Rock, as well as As for the arena selection, there is not a lot to choose from. You have WrestleMania 18, of course, the SmackDown 5th stage, the 2001 Raw Arena, as well as the 2001 Royal Rumble Arena. Now for a wrestling game on the GameCube, that amount of arenas gets the job done just fine, but with there only being a handful of them, the game is going to get repetitive quickly. At least you have a good amount of match types to play, like, well, that's less than I expected. Well, what about the extra modes? Path of a Champion and Battle for the Belts. They're kind of fun, I guess. Path of a Champion has you competing in various matches for different championships, and Battle for the Belts is pretty much the same thing. When you win a championship in Battle for the Belts though, you do get the ability to customize it, which is pretty cool. Overall, WrestleMania 18 is not a great game. The gameplay is boring and repetitive, the arena selection is pretty underwhelming, and there's just not a lot of options when it comes to modes or match types. That's the GameCube version though. There was also a version of this game released for Game Boy Advance, so let's see what that's like. It's ass. Alright, now let's talk about a good WWE game on the GameCube. That, of course, being WrestleMania 19. Just in the main menu alone, you can tell that this game is a huge improvement compared to WrestleMania 18. Once you jump into a match, it just becomes even more clear that the game is just way more fun compared to 18 as well. 18's gameplay was slow and felt super clunky. The gameplay in WrestleMania 19, however, is much faster and feels more responsive. The controls are much better too, with moves not requiring weird button combinations anymore, and they just feel more responsive overall. The controls are still a little weird though by modern standards, but you know what? They work, and that's all that matters. Something else I love about the gameplay of this game is just how wild and out of control things can get. This is one of the most chaotic wrestling games I've ever played. I mean, this is a wrestling game where you can literally throw people off of buildings. What other wrestling game can you think of where you can just casually commit murder? Visually, this game looks pretty damn good for being on the GameCube. Of course, not to say the GameCube didn't have great looking games, but you get what I'm trying to say. The arenas look pretty good as well. Speaking of which, the arena selection in this game is pretty small, only having 5 playable arenas. This is probably the smallest arena selection I've ever seen in a WWE game, but in my opinion, the gameplay being fun more than makes up for the lack of arenas. You know what isn't lacking though? The roster. This game's roster was pretty stacked, featuring 45 superstars, including guys like Scott Steiner, Christian, RVD, and Stone Cold. Also, John Cena's first appearance in a WWE video game was this game, which is pretty cool. Now moving on to the extra modes, there's one mode in this game that I feel is really worth mentioning, and that's just because of how awesome it is. WrestleMania 19 didn't feature a season mode. Instead, it had a mode called Revenge, which was a mission-based story mode. This mode was pretty much just the precursor to Day of Reckoning, which would end up releasing a year later in 2004. If you haven't played the Revenge mode, I highly recommend it, as it is a ton of fun to play through. At the end of the day, WrestleMania 19 is just dumb fun. If you've never played it, I highly suggest giving it a try, as even in 2024, it's still really fun to play. Now that I've talked a bit about WrestleMania 19 though, it's time to move on to the last WrestleMania game for this video. Now the next game I wanted to talk about was supposed to be WrestleMania 21, but due to some technical difficulties, I just couldn't get the game to work. Oh, god damn it. So the last game I'm going to be talking about in this video is none other than Legends of WrestleMania. And this game is just okay. Released in 2009 as more of a spin-off to SmackDown vs. Raw 2009, Legends of WrestleMania was met with pretty negative reviews. I will say the reasons for the bad reviews were pretty fair. The gameplay for this game isn't the greatest and is based almost entirely off of QuickTime events, which is honestly kinda lame. If you do a finisher, it's a QuickTime event. If you do any move at all, it's going to be a QuickTime event. The gameplay felt like a stripped-down version of SVR's gameplay, which many people just did not like, and I get that, but Legends of WrestleMania was something different. The whole selling point of this game was that it focused on Legends of WrestleMania. The game featured over 40 superstars and managers from WrestleMania's past, like Coco Beware, Undertaker, King Kong Bundy, Hulk Hogan, Bret Hart. Alright, you get the idea. The roster for this game was pretty good in my opinion. Hell, you could even import the SVR09 roster into the game and create the ultimate WWE game. Outside of the roster, the arena selections was just okay, featuring WrestleManias 1 through 15, as well as a classic Royal Rumble arena. For the sake of what this game was trying to do though, I'd say these 15 WrestleManias and the Royal Rumble did the job. All the arenas in this game looked pretty spot on honestly, and I think that's what I love the most about this game. The whole presentation of this game was just really damn good. The filters, the UI, everything about this game just had that retro vibe to it. Now I mentioned this briefly in my previous video I made on WWE 13 about how this game did the whole showcase thing first, letting you relive and play classic matches from WWE's history. Something I didn't mention though was that this game also let you rewrite history by playing out matches from WrestleMania history differently from how they actually went down. Andre the Giant versus Big John Studd at WrestleMania 1? Here it is, this time in a Hell in a Cell. Or what about The Undertaker versus King Kong Bundy at WrestleMania 11? Now it's a no holds barred match. Why? I don't know, but it's fun, so who cares? This game is very obviously geared towards more casual wrestling fans. The ones who know what an Andre the Giant is, but aren't sure what the hell a Hornswoggle is. For what this game was trying to do, I think it works just fine. When you look at it as if it's an actual full-fledged wrestling game like SVR, then that's when this game can start to appear as complete ass. Overall, Legends of WrestleMania is fine. Would I suggest you go out and play it? No, but you're really not missing out on much. Even then, it's still a really interesting game regardless. Overall, I have to say these WrestleMania games were weird. A lot of them varied in quality, with some being good or just straight garbage. WrestleMania 18. Despite that though, some of you might have grew up playing these games and have a soft spot for them. If you like the WrestleMania 18 game, that's perfectly okay. It's just I didn't really like it all that much. Personally, out of all these games, I would say WrestleMania 19 is probably my favorite just due to how fun the gameplay is. Now yes, I know I didn't go super in depth into a lot of these games, but I wanted to keep things as brief as possible as I do plan on giving these games their own dedicated retrospectives in the future, which means hopefully I can get WrestleMania 21 to work by then. Otherwise, I'm screwed.